Hello and welcome to this lesson in computer science. This could either be computer science 30S or computer science 40S, depending on the course that you're in. Today we'll be looking at Liberty Basic subroutines and functions. Specifically subroutines today. We're going to talk generically about subroutines and functions just for a moment. So after this lesson, you should know what a subroutine and function is. And you should be able to create a subroutine. And you should understand why we use them. All right, so let's get started. Just like subroutines are just like blocks that we learned in Scratch and BYOB or Snap, whatever we called it when you took the course. Very similar. The word subroutine and function are generic terms that were used in computer science sort of across all languages. I would say that subroutines and functions are cousins. They're very similar, same family of sort of thought processes. Subroutines do processes but may not return a value. You may remember from Snap or BYOB you had reporter blocks that returned values. Reporter blocks could be considered to be functions. All the other blocks that you created in Snap, BYOB would be considered subroutines. And subroutines sort of do things, functions figure stuff out and return a value. So for example, with a draw square or draw a shape block that we created earlier are like subroutines. They do something, but they don't return value. And here's an example of that. Here's the block draw square and repeats 4 times, moves 100 steps and turns 90 degrees. So it doesn't return anything. It just does something. But it creates a block called draw square that simplifies your main code, puts the details in the block itself. Functions return a single value, similar to the reporter blocks that we created. Say, for example, this one here, and this one actually isn't an operator, it's not green, but it did return the bigger value between number 1 and number 2. And return this value. So this is referred to as a function in Liberty Basic and just about any other language. Okay, so let's talk specifically now about subroutines. The general format in Liberty Basic is to use the command call and then my subname. My subname is the name of the subroutine. So it'd be like call draw square or call draw card or call play your turn or something like that. And then you can have various what we call arguments, the values, the variables that are passed, sent to the subroutine. Here they're just labeled as argument 1, argument 2, argument 3, argument n. You can send as many as you want. So the word call, the command call, happens in the main code, and then below the end, the subpart is written after the final end statement in the main code. So you're going to have to include that end if you haven't been doing that before. At the end of your main code, you're going to have all your subroutines, and you'd have my subname be the same name as this right here, and then argument 1, argument 2, argument 3, and so on. Okay? And then some code here, and then to end the sub, you use the expression end sub. Very similar to Scratch or BYOB, with the exception of the blocks sort of being hidden. You having to right-click on the definition to sort of see what's inside the sub. Here, the sub is defined after the mainline code. As I said before, argument 1, argument 2, and so on are called the arguments or values that are passed to the subroutines. These ones here, same thing. The agreements can be arguments can be numerical or strings, but the types must match in the call and substatements. This word should say arguments right here. So in other words, if argument 1 is a number, argument 1 down here must be a number, and if argument 2 here is a string, then this one 2 here must be a string. They must match, otherwise you're likely to run into a type mismatch error. All right, now here's something here. It's called passing by value. We're going to talk a little bit now about passing the variables. The variable names inside a subroutine are scoped locally. Very similar concept to Snap, BYOB, meaning that the value of any variable inside a subroutine is different from the value of a variable of the same name outside the subroutine. They only exist inside the scope of that subroutine. It basically takes the value and creates a new variable that may or may not have the same name. This is called passing by value. The value of the variable is not changed in the main program if it's changed in the subroutine. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of space here, or insert a blank one, and I'm just going to discuss this here for a second with you. So for example, in your mainline code, let's say you've got something called score variable, okay? And then you call a subroutine. So what it does, it creates, if score is say equal to 1700, something like that. The value 1700 is passed to the next variable, and it could be called score, or it could be called number, or it could be called just about anything, okay? So that number 1700 is passed here, and then it is used. And if the score becomes, if you say add 100 to the score in the subroutine, okay, and it becomes 1800, well, when you go back to the mainline code, score unfortunately is still equal to 1700. You've created a copy of that value. You've just taken that 1700 and passed it over and sort of tagged it with, it's now equal to whatever it's called in the subroutine is now equal to that value. And the original score is intact, and it's almost like there's a firewall in place. It can't get back, kind of thing. So that's referred to as passing by value. You take the value 1700 and you pass it to the subroutine. Okay, so now what if you don't want that? Let's get rid of this. What if you don't want that? Then you got to do what's called passing by reference, and a variable may instead be passed by ref is the shorthand version of that, which means that a reference to the actual variable is passed, and a change in the value of this variable in the subroutine affects the value of the variable in the main program. So what I mean here is, let's go back to my original example. Get rid of this guy here. Get rid of the firewall. Okay. So now, if score is equal to 1700 in the main line, instead of just passing the 1700, let's get rid of this guy here. Instead of passing the 1700, what happens is you actually pass the actual variable. The whole variable goes with the value 1700. Okay. I believe you can call it a different name here. And if 1700 becomes 1800, then when the subroutine is ended, then the name and the value go back. Okay, so this is referred to as passing by reference. You actually pass the variable itself and not the value. Okay, and there's a distinct difference here. And as you learn more about computer science and programming, you will see the advantages and disadvantages to this. For now, all you need to know is the difference between the two. One type of thing that might happen, you certainly have to make sure you pass it the right way. If basically you just need to know if you need to be able to change that value, you might want to pass by reference. Okay. Subroutines, when written in isolation by say someone else, would be simply taking in values and dealing with them. So when you insert it into a mainline code, you may need to change the passing process either to by ref or not by ref, passing by value. So that's those two things. You might be familiar with global variables. Variables declared with the global statement are available in the main program and in subroutines and function. You can use these anywhere in the code. So basically they exist anywhere. Things like arrays, handles of files, windows are all global in a Liberty Basic program and are visible inside a subroutine with no need to be passed in. They are automatic. Any array, any file handle, any window handles are all global. Special global status is given as certain default values as well. They're used for sizing, positioning, and coloring windows and controls. These include the variables window width, window height, upper left X, upper left Y, and so on, the different ones you can see here on your screen. Okay, those are all sort of internal type of things. The value of these variables as well as default directory string can be seen modified in any subroutine or function. Okay, so you might think, well, why don't I just make everything global and that'll make things nice and easy? Don't do that. Do not overuse global variables. This may allow a subroutine to accidentally change a variable that it may not have intended to, especially if there's a group programming independently. Now we're dealing with, we may think they're large codes. You think about some of the code that is needed to run any video games that you might be playing at home. Think about the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code. A lot of it is written in a group independently from one another. They have to follow strict rules about overusing global variables. Very cautious with global variables. They can get you into some trouble. Branch labels that you've seen already with the square brackets are locally scoped. This means that code inside a subroutine cannot see branch labels outside the subroutine, and code outside a subroutine cannot see branch labels inside any subroutine. So you can't jump. Once you're in a subroutine, you should not jump out prematurely. You should only leave the subroutine by exiting at the bottom at the end. And all the subroutines must be placed after the main code end. So you must include that final statement in your mainline code. Some advantages. Subroutines are very similar to blocks. The advantages, they make the reading of the mainline code much easier. They allow for a group to code a larger program. They allow reusing of code. You can use subroutines in various different programs by importing them. It allows the creation of subroutine libraries that you can use. And if you go online, there's quite likely actually Liberty Basic online libraries of subroutines that you could download and use. There's certainly Greenfoot ones. There's certainly Java ones. There's basically all over the internet in various languages. So let's just do an example here. I'd like you to write a piece of code that will draw a playing card in the main window. A very simple one, just using asterisks. The subroutine will allow a value from 1 to 13 to be passed, and then depending on the value, draw a card out of asterisk, and the numbers 2 to 10 or Jack, Queen, King, or Ace. So if it's a 1, it becomes an Ace. If it's a 13, it becomes the King. If it's a 12, it becomes the Queen, and if it's 11, it becomes the Jack. That's how that should work. This could be used many times, suggesting in any card game, but we're going to talk about blackjack. So I'd like you to enter this main code. I'll give you a few minutes here. You should probably pause the video. Say input how many cards for x equals 1 to number of cards. Here's my random number feature, and then I'm going to call draw card playing card. So it's going to take the value that is determined in playing card here, the random number. It's going to determine that. It's going to send it to the subroutine that's called draw card, and it's going to print a blank line, and then it's going to next. So if I want 3 cards, it's going to print 3 cards. They're going to be on top of one another. Okay. After the end statement, you might want to pause the video here while you type that in. After the end statement, I'd like you to enter this code here, sub draw card value. Okay. Notice that I used a different name here. Not player card is what I used in my mainline code. In the subroutine, pretend I'm a different person. I'm using a different variable name. It's perfectly all right. I'm going to use the variable name value. So I'm going to print my top row of asterisks. I'm going to print the second row with a space. Then I'm going to put the third one that includes the value, and then the last 2 as well. And then I'm going to end my sub. So I'd like you to type that in after the end statement, and then I'd like you to make some changes to the subcode so that it lines up the dollar sign or the asterisk, and it deals with tens that are digits that are 2 digits wide, as well as converting the 10, 11, and 12 to Jack, Queen, and King. Okay, so that's your job, is to type those in and make those 2 changes, and then show me when you're done. Okay, so give that a try, and as I was saying, when you're done, or if you need some help, please show me if you're done, and if you need some help, give me a call, and I'll try to help you out with that subroutine. Good luck.